Almost 3 years from the 2020 NHL draft, things have gotten absolutely off the rails. A top 16 redraft, there is so much that has changed. So today, I'm going to be ranking my top 16 players from the 2020 draft 3 years later. But which players get inside the top 16 and who are the best players from the 2020 NHL draft? Well, watch till the end to find out and hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this. Now let's waste zero time and get to the first overall pick in the 2020 redraft. And of course, for today's redraft, we're just doing player rankings, so we're not really taking into account who each team would end up selecting. But I do think the Rangers would select this guy first overall anyways if it was a redo. And at number 1, I have Tim Stutzle, who of course was drafted 3rd overall by the Ottawa Senators in 2020. And I think is the only top 3 pick from the draft that is performing up to expectations when we look back on things. At age 21, he's been phenomenal for the Sens, and so far this year in 40 games has taken an even bigger next step. 20 goals, 22 assists for 42 points, has been dynamic offensively, using that skating and those puck skills and translating them so well to the next level. But as you can see with a few guys here, especially the forwards, they were given massive opportunity and ran away with things, and Stutzle was able to make mistakes, get better, and has turned into an elite player because of it. But now let's move on to the second selection, and of course this is where the LA Kings were selecting, and to me this is a really interesting spot, and I think the second best player from the 2020 draft as of right now is Lucas Raymond, who with Stutzle I had 3rd overall in my draft rankings. He went 3rd overall. With Raymond I had him 4th, and he went 4th overall in Detroit, and he has also progressed amazingly offensively. You can see in his rookie season he got 57 points in 82 games. This year started off a little bit slowly, but has scraped and crawled back into the picture, getting 30 points in 43 games. But just like Stutzle, Raymond has been given great opportunity and has thrived under it. And even though he's made some mistakes defensively here and there, his play driving is excellent, and the way he's able to finish off chances has been supreme, and that goal scoring is starting to turn a little bit of a page recently as well, which is great to see. Next up, let's go on to number 3, and this is the spot where the Sens originally selected Stützle, and just like the first pick, I think the Sens would make this pick if they had a do-over and didn't have Stützle on the board. But to me, the 3rd best player in the 2020 draft, and these next few picks are extremely close, but at number 3, I have Jake Sanderson. Now, Jake Sanderson has absolutely proved me wrong in a lot of ways, but it's mostly because of the offensive development of his game. To me, in his draft year, I saw him as an amazing skater, great shutdown guy, but I wasn't really sure if he would find that top 4 offensive potential, but he certainly has. And this year in his rookie season, he's played 44 games for the Sens, getting 16 points, but to me, he could absolutely have a lot more, and he's been on fire on these last couple of weeks. And to me, he's a player that will be a top pairing guy, will be a great overall player, and the way he skates, he's kind of like the next generation of defensemen, and I think he will be among the best in a few years' time. Next up, let's go on to number 4, and this might be one of my most controversial picks, but to me, I still have not given up on this player whatsoever, and to me, the potential is still sky high for this guy. At number 4 with the Red Wings pick, even though they might not select him, but they probably would at this place, and for the 4th best player in the 2020 draft, I'm still gonna go with Quinton Byfield. Now, still extremely young at 20 years old, 6'5", 216 pounds, but to me, I couldn't have him any lower just for the pure fact that I think his potential is still among the best in this draft, and I think there is still a chance that he could become in that top 3. He could even be the 2nd best player when it's all said and done. But as you can see, he's toiled between the NHL and the AHL level, has played pretty decent in the NHL this year in limited minutes, getting 6 points in 17 games, and has played still pretty well at the AHL level, getting 9 goals in 16 games. And even though he hasn't risen to the lengths of other forwards in the class yet, I think there's still a lot of time for Byfield. And obviously, we saw Tage Thompson and everybody giving up on him, and he's now in his mid-20s doing what he's done. Bigger players have a much larger task in adjusting to the NHL level, I feel like, in the speed of the NHL level, and once Byfield does that, I think he'll be pretty great. But next up, let's move on to the 5th best player of the 2020 draft, and let's go on to a guy that has had no trouble adjusting the NHL speed, and that is Cole Perfetti, who was drafted 10th overall by the Jets, and I had 6th on my board back in 2020, but he has been marvelous so far in his rookie season for the Jets, and has been one of the more underrated players too. He played 18 games last year for the Jets and got 7 points, but this year in 40 games has 6 goals, 20 assists, 26 points, and to me has been one of the more impactful Jets there, using his speed and that amazing IQ in so many great ways, especially on the rush. But he's a player that will be a consistent, around a point per game player in the NHL, and will be a great offensive, another great offensive piece for the Jets to work with. Next up, let's move on to a player who I had 7th back in the 2020 draft, and to me was a player that fell way too much considering the talent level and the potential he had. Next up, let's go on to number 6 and go on to Anton Lundell, who's been pretty great as a Florida Panther so far, and at age 21 has developed extremely well so far, which I love to see. He was drafted 12th overall by the Panthers, which I saw as an absolute steal at the time, and so far he's done quite solid. In his rookie season, he was unbelievable, got 44 points in 65 games. This year has taken a little bit of a step back in the production department with 17 points in 37 games, but his defensive game that he had in his rookie year in the Liga has really started to show through this year for the Florida Panthers, and he's made up for that lack of production with great defensive play. But to me, he's going to be one of the best centers, one of the best overall players of this draft, and will continue to be that for the next decade and a half. Next up, going on to another player that I was pretty high on back in the 2020 draft, but probably should have been even higher on as well. Going on to the 7th position here, next up, I have Seth Jarvis of the Carolina Hurricanes. Another player that I thought was a great pick, and with the Patrick Marleau trade, the Canes were somehow able to get 13th overall. But so far, his career has gone great at the moment. In his rookie season, he got 40 points in 68 games. This year, again, has kind of stepped back a little bit in production, but has still done a lot of the right things, and has kind of gotten snake bitten, especially earlier in the season, getting 22 points in 44 games. But to me, he's another great overall player, which I didn't really expect going back in his draft year. He's really turned that defensive efficiency in his favor, but the rush offense, the quickness, the smarts with the puck on his stick, it's all at such a great level, and he'll be a great top 6 player for the Canes for such a long time. But next up, let's move on to number 8, another player that I liked quite a bit in his draft year, had him ranked 15th, but he comes in at number 8 here. Let's go on to the New Jersey Devils forward in Dawson Mercer, who at age 21 has developed pretty much as perfectly as you'd imagine going back to his draft year. He was drafted 18th overall by the Devils and has progressed extremely well in his rookie season with New Jersey, got 42 points, 17 goals in 82 games, and this year has gotten a little bit better points per game and has been especially hot over these last couple weeks, getting 27 points in 44 games. Even though the inconsistencies have kind of taken him away from being this elite player already, when he is on his game, there's very few players that can do what Dawson Mercer does with the puck on his stick. And almost nobody can be as electrifying as him, besides, I guess, Jack Hughes on his own team. Next up, let's move on to one of the more interesting players on this list. I had him ranked 9th overall back in his draft year, and he comes in at number 9 here. Next up, I have Jamie Drysdale with the Anaheim Ducks, who was selected 6th overall back in 2020, and his career has kind of been topsy-turvy so far. He played 24 games, got 8 points in 2021, and played some games as well in the AHL and the World Juniors. Then in his full rookie season in 2022, got 32 points in 81 games with the Ducks squad, and offensively was pretty much as good for a rookie as you could want, especially on the back end. This year, though, was a disaster. In 8 games, he was pointless, didn't really look all too efficient, and then had a shoulder injury, which has put him out for 4 to 6 months, and he needed to get surgery on it as well. So with Drysdale, I'm not really sure what to think. He could still be this great offensive player, but time will definitely tell. Next up, let's go on to number 10, and man, how the mighty have fallen. Let's go on to the 1st overall pick and Alexis Lafreniere. And considering what he's done, and especially the position he's in at age 21, I couldn't justify him having him any higher, honestly. Maybe you could put him ahead of Drysdale, but even then, I think both players are kind of in the same position. But I could not justify having him on top of a player like Seth Jarvis or Lundell or Mercer at this point, especially with the lack of pace that Lafreniere has brought. With the 1st overall pick, he has single-handedly made me scared of drafting QMJHL players too high, because he was about as dominant as you could hope to have besides being Sidney Crosby. 112 points in 52 games in his QMJHL draft year, and then has just continued to not really be the player that we were all expecting. Last year in 2022 was pretty decent in the goal scoring department, but really since then has not progressed like you'd want to see, and that skating has really held him back from being just an actual good player in the NHL. Now let's move on to the 11th best player of the 2020 draft, a player that was drafted 11th overall and a player who I had 12th overall in my draft rankings. Let's go on to Yaroslav Askarov, who at age 20 is in a really fun position. Of course, was drafted by the Preds, and since then has developed about a pretty reasonable level, honestly. Played in the KHL last year a lot in 2022, but this year has taken the jump to the AHL level, and putting up a .903 save percentage as a 20-year-old is pretty miraculous, even though it's not Jesper Wallstedt numbers. I'm still fairly high on Askarov, and I still think he'll be a great goalie for the Preds. The only thing holding him back is usage Juuse Saros, honestly, but I do think Askarov will be a great starter in the future. Now let's move on to number 12, and another player that has progressed really well since his draft year, was drafted 8th overall by the Sabres. Next up, I have Jack Quinn, who at age 21 has done some pretty great things so far since being drafted by the Sabres, went to the AHL level, and especially last year was absolutely unbeatable. And this year in the NHL, he's done some really good things, even though there has been some inconsistencies. This year in 36 games, has 7 goals, 12 assists, 19 points, and has also played pretty solid defense as well. And the 5-on-5 play that he has had, he's done pretty great things with it. And to me, I think Jack Quinn's just going to be a solid overall scorer that gets the job done in their middle six. It'll really depend how much potential he has, if he's able to get that first line time. But even if he's a second line player, that's still a win for the Sabres. But now it is time for number 13, and definitely one of the players I was wrong about the most in this draft. Let's go on to the Habs first round pick in Kaiden Guhle, 16th overall back in 2020, and at age 21, he's done some great things, even if he is injured right now. But in his rookie season, in 36 games, 2 goals, 12 assists, 14 points, he was put on a top pair, was given no shelter minutes whatsoever, and even though there had been some points where he was kind of thrown to the wolves and you could feel like it, at some points he was kind of treading water, which for a 21-year-old defenseman on a top pair and a horrible team like the Montreal Canadiens is honestly pretty miraculous. Back in his draft year, I really didn't know if there was too much progression in his offensive game, especially getting out of his own zone. I thought that was a huge problem, but credit where it is due. He's fixed those problems and has really turned into a quality NHL defenseman up to this point. Next up, let's go on to number 14, and a player that I hope is able to get back into the top 10, in my opinion. Let's go and move on to Marco Rossi, who was drafted 9th overall by the Wild, and to me still has some of the best potential of the 2020 draft, but his career has not gone as successful as he would have liked. And this year, he played in the NHL, really got weird minutes, looked pretty decent when he was getting those top-end minutes, but was eventually sent down to the AHL, where right now he has 16 points in 18 games. Now, to me, with Rossi, the big thing to note is that, again, he almost died due to COVID a couple of years back, and that really derailed his progression. But still, the fact that he's still this solid at age 21, I think is a miraculous feat. And if he's able to continue to progress, especially in the momentum of his game, to me, there could still be a great overall impact center here. And also the Wild admittedly are taking their time with Marco Rossi, so I wouldn't be too concerned that he's not this full-time NHL player yet, because he absolutely will be. But next up, let's move on to the 15th best player of the 2020 draft. And next up, I'm going to go with the New York Rangers D-man in Braden Schneider, who was drafted 19th overall. And I remember really wanting the Rangers to go after Dawson Mercer, which obviously in this ranking would have been better for them. But Schneider has been really solid for the Rangers so far, even if he has gotten sort of sheltered minutes. You can see last year in 43 games, got 11 points, looked pretty solid in the playoffs as well. And this year in 45 games has 10 points, but he's not really looked at as this great offense defenseman, even if he can score a goal or two here and then. But to me, what Schneider has been able to do defensively in his own zone, the way he's been able to carry his skating and the way he's been able to carry the puck, has all been pretty impressive for a 21-year-old, and you definitely want to see that. Even if he might not be a first pairing guy, he could still develop into a really solid 4th and 5th guy at the NHL defense level. Next up, let's go on to number 16, a player that I thought was extremely underrated in the 2020 draft, but has progressed way better than I saw him progressing. I saw him as more of a project back in his draft year, but the Blackhawks have a very good one in Lukas Reichel, another German in the 2020 draft. He was selected 17th overall by the Blackhawks, which I thought was a pretty smart pick at the time, but to me, I saw him as a pretty lengthy project, but he's done amazing things since he was drafted. And last year's AHL campaign was above a point per game. This year is also above a point per game, and just like the Wild with Rossi, the Blackhawks are taking their time with Reichel, but he has already progressed past the point of the AHL level, and in 4 NHL games has 3 points this year. To me, he will be an exceptional, electrifying top 6 player at the next level, and a great overall dual threat offensive guy. And for the Blackhawks, especially over these next few years, having somebody that can actually score will be needed. Now, first of honorable mentions, the first one is Alexander Holtz, who has also done great things in the AHL, but just has never really looked all too complete at the NHL level. I also got JJ Peterka, who has been exceptional at the NHL level so far, in my opinion, getting 18 points in 41 games and looking really good on the rush for the Sabres, as well as Dylan Holloway. Even though he's not getting a lot of opportunity, I think he's done fine in the opportunity he has gotten, and to me will be a solid middle 6 player for the Oilers for a long while, especially on that second, potentially third line as well. But that is my 2020 redraft, and to me, the top 16 players of the 2020 draft as of right now but I need to know down below. What do you guys think? Do you agree? Do you disagree with my rankings? And what would your top players in the 2020 draft look like? Let me know all your thoughts down below. And of course, for people that will take this way too seriously, obviously it's 3 years ahead of time, so it's not going to be a definitive list. Obviously, there's still a lot of time for these prospects and a lot more to go, but I just want to make a fun video because I like making fun videos. Sue me. But thank you so much, guys, for watching. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell if you haven't. Share the 2020 redraft if you guys haven't already to all the hockey fans you guys know online, and click on this card up here for all my hockey prospects talk round 1 playlist. I'll see you in the next video or stream. Have a good one, and goodbye.